Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our complimentary webinar today. I'm Melanie Ross, and I will be the facilitator of our webinar. Our presenter is Patrick Selig. Again, thank you for joining us for this webinar on evaluating reference materials and certified reference materials for laboratories. Please note that we are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our website for viewing in the future. Just a few logistics before we get started. Due to the number of attendees today, everyone is going to remain muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the Q&A box within the WebEx platform. We have planned time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that are asked. Our presenter today is Patrick Selig. Patrick joined ANAB in 2020 as a manager of accreditation, responsible for a variety of testing laboratories and sampling organizations. Patrick's laboratory and technical experience comes from his management and operation of a drinking water, wastewater laboratory in Indiana, and as a graduate research associate and manager for a molecular biology laboratory at Purdue University in Fort Wayne. During his time at Purdue University, he completed a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Biology. He's also published in 2 journals for his work on soybean gene expression. Currently, as the Senior Manager of Accreditation in the Laboratories and Related Systems Business Unit, he's directly responsible for the day-to-day accreditation and management of over 150 accreditations for laboratories, reference material producers, and proficiency test providers within the ISO/IEC 17025 testing and sampling, ISO 17034 for reference material production, and ISO/IEC 17043 for proficiency testing programs. Patrick is a qualified lead assessor for 17025, 17034, and 17043, as well as 2 environmental supplemental accreditation programs. He represents ANAB at ASTM on the E11 Quality and Statistics Committee and at the NELAC Institute on the Field Activities Committee, National Environmental Field Activities Program Executive Committee, Proficiency Testing Program Executive Committee, and the Proficiency Testing Committee. With that, I am going to turn this over to you, Patrick. I'm going to pass the ball so that you can begin our webinar.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Melanie, for the introduction, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. So kind of the key takeaways of what I hope everyone gets out of the webinar is an understanding of metrological traceability requirements for laboratories, understanding the definition of reference material and certified reference materials, learn the appropriate intended uses for reference materials and certified reference materials, and learn how to evaluate reference material and certified reference material documents. So what is metrological traceability? ISO IEC Guide 99 defines it as a property of a measurement result whereby the result can be related to a reference through a documented unbroken chain of calibrations, each contributing to the measurement uncertainty, which essentially allows interchangeability and comparisons between laboratories on data. Many laboratories are accredited to 17025, and one of the clauses in 17025 has a requirement surrounding metrological traceability, and it states that laboratories shall establish and maintain metrological traceability of measurement results by means of documented, unbroken chain of calibrations, each contributing to measurement uncertainty, linking to appropriate reference. There are kind of 2 routes that you can picture in your mind. So there's traceability to the SI, or the International System of Units, and then there's traceability to traceability where it's not possible to establish it to the SI. So we'll dive into those a little bit deeper. So traceability to the SI is typically done by a calibration laboratory or a calibration provided by a competent laboratory. In this case, a lot of times you'll see 17025 accredited calibration laboratories as deemed competent to perform this type of calibration, which establishes metrological traceability to the SI. Certified values of certified reference materials provided by a competent producer with a stated metrological traceability to the SI is another way of establishing this traceability. And also direct realization of SI units, ensured by comparison directly or indirectly to national or international standards. So when traceability to SI is not technically possible, certified values of certified reference materials provided by a competent producers can also be utilized. Results of reference measurement procedures, specified methods, or consensus standards that are clearly described and accepted as providing measurement results fit for intended use and ensured by suitable comparison. So an example there would be, a standard method. If two separate laboratories are both accredited to one method and perform it the exact same way, and for both labs, it's not traceable to the SI, but it's traceable to that method itself. So you've heard me say competent producer when we talked about the calibration laboratories is deemed competent for providing traceability to the SI through calibration of a piece of equipment. For reference materials, we have a kind of analogous I guess I don't know how to call it comparison, that a reference material producer is deemed competent if they're accredited to 17034. And 17034 also has the general requirements for competence for reference material producers that aren't accredited. So even if you're not accredited, you can use this standard to improve. If you're a reference material producer or want to produce reference materials, you can use that document. So ISO 17034, like I said, is an ISO standard for conformity assessment, much like 17025 is. And it specifies general requirements for competence of consistent operation of reference material producers. And it's used as part of a general quality assurance procedures and reference material producers, and covers production of all reference materials and certified reference materials. So, just as 17025 is to laboratories, 17034 is to reference material producers. It used to be back in the day that before 17034 was out, 17025 was the appropriate standard. However, that's no longer the case. 17034 has been out since 2016. Before that, it was Guide 34. And that's now the appropriate standard to purchase reference materials from. The definition of a reference material and certified reference material. So a reference material is a material sufficiently homogeneous and stable with respect to one or more specified properties, which has been established to be fit for its intended use in a measurement process. A certified reference material, or CRM, is a reference material characterized by a metrologically valid procedure for one or more specified properties, accompanied by a reference material certificate that provides a value for the specified property, its associated uncertainty, and a statement of metrological traceability. So reference material it's a generic term that includes certified reference materials. So if you look at the picture here, figure 1, reference material encompasses certified reference materials, and certified reference materials are a subset of reference materials. And they have different functions as well. So uses of RMs, and anytime I say RMs, keep in mind that I'm including CRMs in that bubble unless I state otherwise. So use of RMs, the generic term, can be used as or used in the calibration of a measurement system. They can be used as secondary checks, used for system suitability, assessment of a measurement procedure, assigning values to other materials, and quality control. Uses of CRMs specifically, their primary function is in establishing metrological traceability. And they can establish metrological traceability in many of these different ways here on the uses of RMs. So keep that in the back of your head when you're looking for an RM or a CRM. If you need metrological traceability, you need a CRM. When you're evaluating reference materials and certified reference materials, it can be kind of broken into three different sections. So you need to know what you need. So you need to identify your measurement needs. Once you think you found a material that might suit your needs, you have to ensure it's fit for its intended purpose. After you purchase that material and you've received it in your laboratory, you need to ensure that the material conforms to the requirements that both you've set out, the standard sets out, and overall make sure it's what you ordered. So building more upon that, on what to consider when purchasing, first and foremost is metrological traceability needed. If it's needed, you'll need a CRM. Does the RM need to match the matrix tested? This is common in the environmental programs where you've got matrix specific items and tests. So you got drinking water and non-potable water and salt water and all sorts of different matrices in the environmental programs. Is the property or certified value appropriate for the testing performed? They come in a wide range of concentrations and types and purity. So you need to make sure that it's fit for your test, especially your testing range. Is the uncertainty suitable? So if you're using this material, certified reference material, for calibration, the uncertainty of the reference material will affect your measurement uncertainty. So when you look at the uncertainty statement on a reference material certificate, is it suitable? Is your laboratory able to store this reference material or certified reference material appropriately? Some have storage requirements, 4 degrees Celsius. Some are, stable at room temperature. Some need to be protected from light. Is your laboratory able to accommodate those storage conditions? Is the RM or CRM produced by a 17034 accredited reference material producer? So basically by saying an accredited producer, I'm saying, is it produced by a competent producer? That's one of the ways to deem a reference material producer as competent. Does the test method or regulatory agencies specify a required material? So this is an area where it kind of gets confusing, is sometimes methods or regulations will specify the use of a very specific material. And in those cases, the competent producer would oftentimes be an organization that's specified in that method to produce that material. One I can think of off the top of my head is oftentimes USP is specified as the regulatory, well, they're not the regulatory agency. The FDA specifies a USP material. So what we really need to remember is that traceability to the SI can be achieved by certified values of certified reference materials provided by a competent producer with stated metrological traceability to the SI. When traceability to the SI is not technically possible, use certified values of certified reference materials provided by a competent producer. So they're both similar. There are certified reference materials that aren't traceable to the SI. Sometimes they're traceable to an organism. In the case of microbiology, they can be traceable to provenance. So if you think of kind of provenance of a painting or even of some bottles of wine will have provenance, that's a type of metrological traceability. So reference material and certified reference material documents. The standard specifies that they're called two different items. Reference material, and this time I'm speaking specifically about reference materials excluding certified reference materials, should have product information sheets or similarly named documents. So at the top, typically, historically, you'd see either certificate of analysis. You often see that on test reports as well. But what we expect to see here is a product information sheet or similarly named. For a certified reference material specifically, we're looking for an RM certificate or certificate of analysis. Both of those names are accepted. And those are just it's to help prevent confusion in the marketplace as to understanding what material you're actually getting. And you know, if you're purchasing a certified reference material that you want to use to establish metrological traceability, you don't want to receive a reference material. So what are we looking for on these documents? So we're looking for a unique identifier of the reference material itself. We're looking for a statement of accreditation or an accreditation symbol. We're looking for a property value, the intended use on how we're supposed to use this product, or if there's any preparation required in its use. We're looking for the expiration date or period of validity. It's required to have the name and contact details of the RMP. So if you have any questions, you can get a hold of them and ask those questions and get them answered. Any storage details, like I was talking about, hiding it from, you know, if it's sensitive to light, it should come in a brown bottle or the brown bag to protect it. Handling and use instructions, so preparations could also be in there. And what matrix it's in, if that's appropriate for the specific reference material. For RM certificates, so specifically for certified reference material, we need to see a metrological traceability statement. And so the statement should indicate how it's traceable to the SI or how it's traceable to the item that it needs to be traceable to. So for certified reference material strains of bacteria, they need to be traceable to the organism, and it needs to discuss how it's traceable to that organism. Should also have a certified, well, it shouldn't, it has to have a certified value and an associated uncertainty as well. So in summary of both of those different documents that come with the various items, I wanted to show this sheet because it shows that your RM certificate just doesn't have those three. It has, you know, all of the different items we've discussed. And a product information sheet doesn't necessarily have to have metrological traceability or certified value. However, the RM certificate does. One item to keep in mind here is that sometimes a certified reference material can include property values that are not metrologically traceable. Now, if they're an accredited provider, they're required to identify these so that you know, if it's maybe 20 analytes in the certified reference material, which analytes are traceable and which analytes are not. So that's important to pay attention to. So once you get your hands on these certificates or product information sheets, if you're looking for metrological traceability to satisfy your 17025 calibration requirement or your 17025 metrological traceability requirements, what you need to be looking for is an accreditation symbol or a reference to that accreditation that includes the certificate number and the accrediting body. You also need to review the certified value, making sure that it's within the range of use that you need, that the associated uncertainty is sufficiently small in your case, and that it's got that statement of metrological traceability so that you understand how it's traceable to the SI. Because ultimately, if you're accredited, your measurements have to be traceable to the SI, and if you're using a reference material or a certified reference material rather, as your source of metrological traceability, then it is the laboratory's responsibility then to understand how the measurement is traceable through the certified reference material, ultimately to the SI. So further guidance on these topics, ISO Working Group 334 has just recently been publishing or republishing, I guess I should say, a bunch of different reference material related documents Many of them are for producers, but this one in particular, ISO 33402, reference materials, requirements, and recommendations for use, is applicable to laboratories. So that's a great document to review. ANAB also published guidance document 2708, guidance on purchasing and evaluating reference materials, earlier this year, and it's available on our website. So both of those are good sources for more information that's right along these lines. So in conclusion, I hope that what you all get out of this is an understanding that, reference materials is a generic term for any materials produced by a reference material producer that are, that's sufficiently homogeneous and stable. They contain a property value, all of those items. A certified reference material is a subset of, the broad generic reference materials that includes a certified value, an associated uncertainty, and a statement of metrological traceability of that certified value. That reference materials may be used for secondary checks and systems suitability standards and for assisting and validating methods and all sorts of uses for reference materials. And for CRMs, their primary function is to establish metrological traceability of laboratory measurements and for, calibration purposes there. That's how you calibrate, your LCMS or your GCMS or a number of different pieces of equipment in the laboratory that aren't able to be calibrated by a 17025 calibration accredited calibration provider. And I believe that wraps everything up.
Yes, it does. Excuse me. Thank you, Patrick, for that presentation. So that you have time to enter any questions you may have into the QA box, I'm just going to go over some additional resources that ANAB has for you in your accreditation journey or for your laboratory. So we offer, excuse me, we offer webcasts on our website at the web address here. The webcasts are short 5 to 15-minute presentations pre-recorded on a variety of different topics, like do's and don'ts of management reviews, top nonconformities for non-forensics laboratories, and other topics like that. We also offer these webinars monthly. We have actually been doing 2 webinars a month because we have so much information to share out to the conformity assessment community. But all of our webinar recordings are available on our website at the web address shown here, or you can go to resources on the ANAB website to find the previous recordings of our webinars. We also have a blog that has a wealth of information related to risk, accreditation, standard requirements, and many other topics. The topics range across conformity assessment activities, from management system certifications to laboratories to proficiency testing and reference material producers as well. Then we also offer a variety of different trainings in different formats. Most of our trainings are live online, instructed by a live instructor. We also offer self-paced trainings, and we offer private training that can be customizable to the needs of your organization based on the conformity assessment activities that you are performing. So we do have plenty of time left for questions, and I've seen a couple come into the Q&A, so I'm going to pose these questions to Patrick and get the answers for them. The first question that came in is, if an accredited provider sells a standard that is neat, can it be a CRM? Because there isn't a concentration per se. And they go on to say, we have a situation where we found a denatured standard for a drug that is neat, but it only comes in a reference material and not CRM. We intend to use it as an internal standard for quantitation, no measurement uncertainty, but a percent purity is stated.
So yes, first of all, yes, a neat material can be a certified reference material. There's different guidance on how it is to be done, and I can't speak to as, this particular material that you're discussing here, but it is possible, and then the uncertainty can be stated because it's essentially your uncertainty involves the analysis of impurities, basically, and the percent water and a number of different things.
And I did say denatured, but it says deuterated. So just
Oh.
just so the submitter of the question knows, I did read it wrong when I said that. Not that that changes your answer any. All
So
right, the
yes,
next question
the
is
CRM can be a purity CRM.
okay, perfect. The next question, can one use a proficiency test sample as an RM?
It's kind of it depends question. You know, what do you mean by use as an RM? Are you talking all the different ways that you can use one? So it goes back to kind of the intended use. What are you using it for? Are you using it as a secondary check? Are you using it for competency review? There's quite a different ways to use RM. So without a little bit more information, I can't give you 100% answer, and it also depends on the proficiency test sample itself, and what stability requirements that PTP is placed upon that particular test sample.
Okay, great. And then the next one is, in a lab that requires a verified RM or a CRM, in our ANAB audit, it was determined we still were required to use a CRM because our lab is not 17034 accredited, therefore cannot deem the RM suitable for verifying it. Is that correct? We aren't claiming it is a CRM, just a verified RM, but it is for quantitative analysis requiring metrological traceability.
That one's requires a verified RM or a CRM. Can you repeat the question?
Let's see, in a lab that requires a verified RM or a CRM, in our audit, it was determined we still were required to use a CRM because our lab is not 17034 accredited, therefore cannot deem the RM suitable by verifying it.
Okay, so the question kind of comes to the requirement that the reference material be produced by a competent producer. So I can't attest to the specifics of it. It is possible to produce your own CRMs, but it is also very challenging to produce certified reference materials. You know, the competence requirements for producing reference materials are identified in ISO 17034. That would be where I would go with that. And if you're trying to establish traceability, again, you would need a certified reference material. And if you're not needing a certified reference material, you're just doing a verification, I don't know that you couldn't use a reference material that that you produced in-house. I would have to double check on that.
Okay, great. I have the individual's name that asked that question, so I'll give that to you after the webinar.
Okay.
The next question, a reference material producer we have used is accredited to ISO 17025 for testing reference materials and not 17034. Is this acceptable?
So is the 17025 producer appropriate, essentially? So this gets into a very controversial topic, and what's the difference between a calibration standard and a reference material? So it sort of depends on what the material is itself, and without knowing that, I can't give you a 100% answer, you know, 100% correct answer. What I can tell you is that from what I've seen throughout my review of all sorts of documentation, typically 17025 is not the correct standard for production of a reference material. 17034 includes requirements on testing. It requires that all tests are performed under the same requirements as 17025. So in essence, it adds and builds upon 17025 and specifies specifically for competence of reference material production. So without information on what the specific item is, I can't give you a 100% answer, but most of the time 17034 is the correct producer and not 17025.
Right. I think the next question's an easy one. Does ANAB provide accreditation for reference material producers?
We do, and I can't remember if my email was on the beginning of the presentation or not, but we can get you my email and you can reach out.
I'll provide that name to you as well. So the person that was talking about using proficiency test items as an RM, they said for secondary checks and to develop measurement uncertainty.
For secondary checks, yes,
Mm-hmm.
you can use that. You can use an RM for that for sure. For developing measurement uncertainty, you're running into breaking your chain of metrological traceability. Because if you're introducing measurement uncertainties that's not traceable, then your measurement is no longer traceable.
Okay, the next question, we may need some more context on it. It says, does ANAB require RM from accredited manufacturers?
So reference material producers is a growing field, and there isn't a reference material or a certified reference material available for all test items. With that being said, we do require calibrations that are performed by a reference material to come from a competent producer. That competent producer can be accredited to 17034 by an ILAC MRA signatory, or can be specified by a regulatory agency, or I'm trying to think here, the JCTLM for medical testing laboratories has standards that it produces. So there's a number of different requirements around that, and it's provided in our accreditation requirements document. So for specific requirements, I would look there. But in general, yes, we do require 17034 producer when available.
Okay, great. The next two questions are pretty similar, so I'm going to ask them together. The first one is, can a PT material be a CRM? And then someone followed up with additional specifics of, can we use a specific PT artifact received as a CRM where the metrological traceability can be evidenced as the results published by the PT provider?
So it depends on your proficiency testing provider and what information they provide, and how the CRM is produced. Also, if the proficiency testing provider is accredited to 17043, it will play a role into that. So is it possible? Yes. Yeah, I mean, it is possible that you could use a CRM, a retained PT sample that is a CRM for calibration. But it depends on a lot of factors. And if you don't have a reference material certificate to support all of those factors, you could run into issues.
Okay, next question, and they're still coming in. So this one, we are a 17025 accredited lab. For the samples that we use for internal quality control and proficiency testing, should those samples be RMs purchased from a 17034 accredited RM producer? If yes, is this preference or mandatory? So they said both internal quality control and proficiency testing. So I think those would be two different discussions.
Yeah, so for the internal quality control, depends on the program you're accredited to. I think some environmental programs have very specific requirements on what your quality control items need to be. Generally speaking, for just, regular 17025 accreditation, there's no requirement that I can think of, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no requirement that it has to be from a reference material producer for internal quality control items. And what was the second question?
So they asked both about internal quality control and proficiency testing. So if they were getting proficiency testing items, that would be 17043. So
yeah, that's pretty often what I've seen and what I've heard from laboratories doing with retained PT samples is using them as an internal check. So it's possible. Whether it's best practice, that's another topic. But you're not establishing your metrological traceability by your checks. You're establishing that during your calibration. All you're doing is with those check RMs or internal quality control items is verifying that your calibration is still appropriate.
yes, two distinct activities in the
Yeah.
laboratory. And then the next question, is it a requirement to use a secondary CRM source if one is already available and traceable within our lab for validation and quality control checks?
That again depends on what kind of lab you are. I know some supplemental programs, especially environmental programs, do have requirements around this. So I can't speak to those specifically. So I don't have a firm answer for you. I know, just based 17025 testing requirements for ANAB, there's no set requirement on how it's calibrated, only that it's traceable. And if you're using certified reference material, there's metrological traceability requirements there. I think that answers the question.
Okay. The next one's an interesting topic. It says USP is accredited to 17025 and not 17034. We purchase scheduled controlled substances that we can't find anywhere else. So there's no question there, but maybe speak to using like NIST standards and USP standards and things like that that may not be 17034.
Yeah, so in our requirements document, we spell out that use of an NMI's, so a National Metrology Institute's materials is appropriate also. So I don't believe NIST is accredited to 17034, but I believe they indicate that they conform to 17034. And those are kind of higher level standards. Their metrologic or their measurement, or not their measurement uncertainty, but their associated uncertainty is a lot smaller than most CRMs will be, because most CRMs are getting, their uncertainties from NIST, at least that are produced in the U.S. So for like USP and some of those agency related or regulated materials, it'll depend on, if you've got a regulatory requirement that specifies a specific material from a specific organization or just the material itself. You have to follow those per the regulation.
Okay, then we had the same question come in twice from two different individuals. So how many CRMs are required to validate a test method for 17025? It says, such as, if the source is providing a CRM which is under 17034, is there a requirement to obtain a second CRM for testing? Or can one CRM be used wherein the QCs are prepared with the one CRM, but by a different preparation procedure?
I don't know if I can speak directly on that. The only thing I can say is that I don't believe there are method validation requirements in 17025, but I don't recall that they specify any number of CRMs. So I'm sorry I can't answer, directly there, but yeah, I don't believe that there's a reference or a requirement within the method validation section that requires specific number of CRMs.
Right. It would really be dependent on their method validation process too,
Yeah,
and the method that they were validating, what
right.
their
Yeah, and the range
characteristics that they were looking at. Yeah.
and the ranges and the analytes.
Well, we still have questions coming in, so we'll keep going. It says,
Uh-huh.
if an RM has been tested against a CRM and verified for use, purity, etc., and documented, can that RM be used in future testing and metrological traceability be intact? Would the laboratory be compliant with 17025 requirements for quantitative analysis? It says this issue comes up when CRM cannot be purchased in a large enough volume, is cost prohibitive, etc.
Gotcha. So we remember what the three key items for metrological traceability, or for really a certified reference material, it's metrological traceability for an unbroken chain of comparisons with associated measurement uncertainty, or with not measurement uncertainty, but with associated uncertainty. So I didn't hear uncertainty discussed in that question. So I can't think of a reason that you couldn't demonstrate equivalency. However, there's a lot of, again, what we're seeing with 17034 accredited producers is that they've been deemed competent by an accreditation body. You know, it's an attestation that they're competent to do that. So that question, I think, is missing also a competence component on, does the laboratory maintain the competence to do that? So there's a bunch of different questions that kind of arise when you start transferring values. Not to say that it's not possible, but it's just another area to dive into to ensure that you're still traceable.
All right, so the next question is, if a CRM is characterized by a network of competent labs, do all of these results have to be traceable or only a subset of those results?
And we're talking about a certified reference material that was characterized through a network of
Yes.
competent labs.
Yes.
And then what was the second half of the question? I got stuck.
Do all of these results have to be traceable or only a subset of those results?
Yeah, this would be the same kind of discussion that we were talking about earlier, where if a component of your metrological traceability is broken, then you're no longer metrologically traceable. So yeah, they would have to all be metrologically traceable to create a CRM.
Okay, and then the last question that's in our Q&A box, if you have any others, please enter them in, is where the equipment is only calibrated through the manufacturer and does not require recalibration unless malfunction. Is metrological traceability necessary / required?
Or equipment use. We're kind of getting outside of the the realm of our discussion, but we'll take a stab at this one. So I'm not aware of equipment like this. I mean, I can, you know, like your LCMS and things like that can't be calibrated via the typical calibration laboratories, but they use a certified reference material. So you're saying in this one where there's no certified reference material.
Well, they didn't even really mention that. So I think the two
Yeah,
issues are being conflated together. So if there is certified reference materials and it's a numerical value, the metrological traceability still needs to be there.
yeah,
The calibration was done initially by the manufacturer, so it may not have been to 17025, but
yeah.
there's no absolving of the metrological traceability because it's not recalibrated. So like you said, with
Yeah.
LCMS, they still use CRMs to verify that the equipment's functioning and that
Oh,
or
and
to,
to
and to
calibrate them.
verify metrological traceability, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, and to calibrate them.
Yeah.
So those terms in general sometimes get confused. You know, the quality control material, the internal verification standard. You know, the industry has all sorts of names, and it's really what needs to be focused on is really what is the intended use of the item? What function are you using this material for? Are you using it for calibration? Are you using it to ensure that you're still calibrated? Yeah. For the equipment, that's kind of getting into a general calibration, metrological traceability question. Sometimes the manufacturers will have appropriate standards and an unbroken chain of comparisons with measurement traceability or with uncertainty, and that has to be requested. So I can't give you a firm answer on that. I know there are exceptions to some of those requirements. Well, there aren't exceptions to metrological traceability, but there are instances where a manufacturer does have metrological traceability for their calibration. But that does bring up the point again that it's the laboratory's responsibility to know where that measurement traceability, the measurements that are metrologically traceable, where that metrological traceability is coming from and how it's established.
Okay, we did have one more question come in. It says, for the RMs used as standards for periodic verification of equipment that has been 17025 calibrated, should those RMs be from an accredited producer?
It depends. Do you want to buy an off-the-shelf standard that's ready to go and you don't have to demonstrate competence and things like that? That's one option. If you want to document all the requirements to be a competent person to produce or laboratory to produce, that's another option. Oftentimes, I think people find it just much easier to purchase through an accredited 17034 provider. Yeah, and again, they're in the standards. I don't believe there's requirements on quality control standards. Only on standards used for establishing metrological traceability, like CRMs.
Correct. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in our Q&A box. If you do come up with some questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. Patrick, I really thank you for doing this webinar today. It was definitely an interesting topic. And if you would like more information about our training, you can email us at training@anab.org. And if you have any questions about accreditation or the services that ANAB provides, or questions about this webinar that you would like to get to Patrick, you can send them to anab@anab.org, and I will make sure that they get over to him. Thank you all for attending this webinar. Again, the recording will be available on our website once it processes through our system. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Melanie.